Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
An mRNA vaccine should now be offered as a second dose for individuals who received a first dose of AstraZeneca or Covishield.
Canada's Vaccine Committee recommends avoiding AstraZeneca for a second shot. But BC health officials say 2 doses of any vaccine are safe. Also,
students will be back in the classroom for full-time in-person instruction and the return to a near normal start to school in September.
students head back to class for the new school year with no more cohorts.
I think it's great.
It's going to be great to be able to be back and hang out with their friends, play sports.
But will they still have to wear masks? And
I have stepped down as the spokesperson for the board because I find their positions indefensible.
Vancouver's mayor says he will no longer speak for the city's police board, claiming a lack of action on systemic racism.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away tonight. Canadians are being told to avoid the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine if possible. Earlier, the expert panel that advises federal health officials recommended not getting it as a first shot. And as David Cochran reports, now it says to avoid AstraZeneca as a second shot as well.
Ready? Yeah. With second shots on the rise and mRNA vaccines arriving by the millions, the guidance for people who got AstraZeneca is changing yet again.
An mRNA vaccine should now be offered as a second dose for individuals who received a first dose of AstraZeneca or Covishield vaccine.
People can still get AstraZeneca as a second dose if they want, but the new guidance reflects emerging evidence of a potentially better immune response from mixing vaccines and no risk of the rare but serious blood clots associated with AstraZeneca. For people who have received 1 dose of Pfizer or Moderna, the advice is to get the same vaccine for the second shot if possible, but it's safe to mix vaccines if not. But what about people who already have 2 shots of AstraZeneca?
I wish to emphasize that people who receive 2 doses of AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine can rest assured that the vaccine they receive provides good protection against infection and very good protection against severe disease and hospitalization.
It represents a more formal shift toward Pfizer and Moderna, something that was happening anyway as weekly deliveries have surged. With Pfizer delivering like clockwork and Moderna now accelerating deliveries, Canada will receive more than 10 million doses in this week alone. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, despite NACI's recommendations, health officials in BC have a different view. For more on that, we're joined in studio by the CBC's Zara Premji. Zara, what is the province's recommendation?
Dan, simply put, Dr. Henry says in British Columbia, she believes we need to stick with the path we're already on with vaccines.
Our advice has not changed. You make the choice that is right for you. 2 doses of whatever vaccine you receive are safe and effective and work here in BC.
Henry is careful to say this is the path BC will follow for now, as we have seen recommendations on parts of the pandemic response have changed as evidence and research continue. But for now, she says the mRNA vaccines, that's Moderna and Pfizer, as well as AstraZeneca, are effective. She adds if you mix, you may even get additional benefits, but we don't know that for sure yet. Dr. Henry also says if immune response wavers with time to any combination of the vaccines, then a 3rd dose may be necessary. But at this point, there's no indication of that. Dan.
Zara Premji reporting tonight. Thank you. BC is reporting 120 new COVID cases and sadly 1 new death today. We've now lost 1,739 people. 131 people are in hospital right now, 44 in intensive care. A record high 57,000 people received a second dose of a COVID vaccine just yesterday. Now, for months now, the message from BC health officials has been clear. Get vaccinated. So imagine a mission man's surprise when he showed up for his scheduled second dose and was denied. As Belle Puri of our CBC Impact team reports, BC's vaccination system leaves little room for patient self-advocacy if there's a mistake.
After decades of telling other people's stories, this husband and wife camera team is baffled by its own. When Chris Lindgren went in for his COVID vaccine top-up, neither expected this.
And they said, you have already got your second shot,
basically, bye-bye, go home.
It was a confirmed booking for June 11th at 12:30, but Fraser Health staff at the Mission Clinic were adamant he got the shot 2 days earlier. Lindgren says no way.
I honestly don't understand.
To confuse matters further, the couple also got confirmation for a second dose on June 9th at 10:35, but the email arrived on June 9th at 10:36.
They said, do not reply to this email. But there also was if you wanted to cancel it. But why should I cancel it? It was already too late, so I didn't do anything.
The pair went to the clinic as planned on Friday the 11th.
They said they had witnesses, 2 witnesses, that I was there on the 9th and got my shot, which is not right. I mean, I was home that time of day.
Lindgren wasn't allowed access to the witnesses, so he produced his vaccine card with no record of a second shot.
They filled out that I've got in on the 9th and got my second shot.
But they filled it out on the 11th?
Yes.
CBC checked Lindgren's cell phone location data. It shows the device was home on June 9th until 11:15 when the couple drove to Abbotsford.
Like most British Columbians, the Lindgrens are eager to get back to gatherings with friends and family. They have a new granddaughter born during the pandemic who they haven't met, and their work depends on being fully vaccinated.
Fraser Health won't discuss details of the case due to privacy concerns, but says this is a serious matter and we are looking into it. Generally, we have strict processes in place to keep track of doses. Lindgren is 81.
I think they tried to get it to a point where I wasn't having my marbles in the right place, because they asked me how old I was and then immediately after, go home.
This week, one more Fraser Health email announcing Lindgren was booked June 15th for a first dose of vaccine. He's had his first vaccine for 3 months already.
I don't know what's going to happen if I only have 1 shot.
No word on if there will be a second. Belle Puri, CBC News, Burnaby.
Dr. Bonnie Henry was asked today if there is any harm in getting a 3rd dose of COVID vaccine. She says there is no health risk in taking yet another shot.
No, there's no harm to one's health. There's no risk for getting a 3rd dose. It won't count as a 3rd dose, essentially. It just is the same. If you get them too close together, your body doesn't recognize it as more than one. So, but there's no adverse effects that we know of. There can be an increased sore arm and a local reaction.
Parents, teachers, and students in BC now have a clearer picture of what fall is going to look like. The province is promising a, quote, near normal back to school come September. Our Tanya Fletcher is here with more. Tanya, what exactly can people expect?
Well, the plans being laid out now hinge on projections that most adults and children 12 plus will be fully vaccinated by the new school year. So here's what will be different for back to class this fall. Students will no longer have to be in cohorts. We'll see the return of extracurricular activities as well, including drama, sports tournaments, field trips, and band concerts. Now, as for whether masks will need to be worn for those in grades 4 and up come September, well, the education minister says a decision will be made later this summer, and it'll be dependent on the public health guidelines at the time. There is new funding for all of this. It's mainly going to go towards cleaning, improved ventilation, and PPE.
So, Tanya, what is the reaction, particularly from teachers? What do they make of this plan?
Overall, the union is pleased to hear this return to school characterized as near normal, because it still won't be completely normal, they say. The BC Teachers Federation would like to see an optional transitional program for students who aren't quite ready to go back right away. They say it makes sense that some decisions like mask wearing are being left TBD, depending on what the situation is towards the end of the summer, but they will be pushing for more data and details to help inform those decisions.
We'll need to know, for example, vaccination rates of 12 to 17-year-olds. Right now it's sitting at 50%, but we haven't seen a regional breakdown. So there could be a need for a regional approach next year, like we were advocating for this year in terms of mask wearing, for example.
And as for parents, the response has been mostly positive.
Really excited for the kids. It's going to be great to be able to be back and hang out with their friends, play sports.
They need the resiliency that they get when they're at school with kids and friends, and I think they really missed out this past year.
I think that we've done a really good job keeping them safe, and if everyone feels, the government and the school feels that it's safe, then it is.
So September 7th is the day to mark your calendar for back to class. That's the same day BC is expected to enter its final phase, step 4 of its reopening plan. Dan?
Lots coming up. Tanya Fletcher, thanks very much. To other news now, Richmond RCMP says mischief charges have now been laid against 2 people allegedly involved in an anti-Asian hate incident caught on video in Steveston in March. Astrid Seacrev and Michel Bertom allegedly made racial slurs toward a coffee shop worker after that person asked the couple to stay distanced.
Hate has no place in our community. We are committed to investigating every incident to its fullest.
A woman was arrested at the time and has since been released. Tension is rising between Vancouver City Hall and the city's police department. Mayor Kennedy Stewart has now renounced his position as spokesperson for the police board. And as the CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, he says the board needs to step up and address systemic racism in the police ranks.
Kennedy Stewart will no longer be the public face of Vancouver's police board, citing a failure to address systemic racism in the force.
You know, there's a lot of things police do that are great, and I'm happy to stand beside. And there's a lot of decisions the board that have made that are good, and I'm happy to stand beside. But on this item in particular, you know, things need to change, and I just I can't do it anymore.
After 2 high-profile incidents with Vancouver police, a former judge handcuffed on the seawall, mistaken for another black man decades younger than him, and an Indigenous man with his 12-year-old granddaughter handcuffed while trying to open a bank account.
I'm not saying those police officers are racists. What I'm saying is that the way they carried out their duties, the way that it was fairly nonchalant, that they were following policy. They were following policy that's set by the board.
Vancouver Police Chief Adam Palmer has called allegations of systemic racism offensive. A police sergeant is accusing the mayor of creating a toxic work environment. Former Solicitor General Kash Heat says this kind of public rupture is rare.
You have the board, which seems to be sitting on the fence on this particular issue. You have the chief who continually entrenches and digs deeper into his position on systemic racism. And you have the mayor, which is a breath of fresh air, coming out and saying we need police reforms. We need to recognize it before we can change it.
The Vancouver Police Board did not respond to a CBC request for comment, neither did Police Chief Adam Palmer. Stewart says it's time for reform.
You know, City Council hires and fires the fire chief. Well, City Council should probably hire and fire the police chief. And that's what happens in other cities, and that's what should happen here.
Stewart says unless the province changes the Police Act, his hands are tied. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police are asking for your help to find a Burnaby man.
He does have connections to gang and drug activity, and we do not believe that his disappearance is random.
Homicide investigators believe Parminder Rai may be the victim of foul play. The 33-year-old man was last seen June 4th near University Crescent and Tower Road on Burnaby Mountain. Rai was reported missing by his family June 9th. Anyone with information is asked to call police. Starting today, you will have to slow down in 6 Surrey neighborhoods.
We know how fast we drive is a key factor if whether or not somebody is actually killed or injured in a collision.
Speed limits are going to be brought down to 30 kilometers an hour in 3 areas and 40 clicks in 3 others. You can see the boundaries more closely of these pilot areas on the city's website. The Slow Streets pilot project is running until December 2022. And a growing wildfire has prompted an evacuation alert for nearly a dozen properties south of Lytton. This time-lapse video of the fire shows it starting late yesterday. 8 of the homes are on the Lytton First Nation Reserve. The others are along George Road and Highway 1. The wildfire has now burned about 60 hectares of brush and forest. Amy Bell is here this week for weather downright warm again, Joe. We know that's a concern for things like wildfires.
Yeah, and of course, up at near Lytton, we are dealing with very sunny and very warm conditions. The only saving grace is that the winds are very low at the moment and not forecasted to be gusting significantly in the next while. But we are going to see things remaining very, very warm and sunny pretty much for the next week. Saturday will be a bit cloudy, but I don't see any precipitation mixed in there. So we'll certainly keep an eye on the area. area. For us, we're looking at sunshine and very warm temperatures, and that's how we're going to remain for most of the province. In fact, we are going to see a lot of sun, some clouds moving in on Saturday, but this ridge of low pressure pretty much keeping us dry except for the north coast and some parts of Vancouver Island. And then what we will see next week is those temperatures getting even warmer, and then we will see them gradually cooling but staying sunny.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. In Nelson, a group of high school students could be facing criminal charges after a grad prank went much too far. The Sunday prank at LV Rogers Secondary School caused thousands of dollars in damage. Vandals covered halls with classrooms with food, glitter, and dye. The mess so bad, authorities said classes had to be canceled on Monday. Some allegedly involved could now face charges of break-and-enter and mischief over $5,000. During the NHL playoffs here on CBC, reminder of how and where you can watch this show. We will be here every day, weekday at 6 o'clock online, streaming on CBC Gem, YouTube, and Facebook. And then we will air on TV after the hockey game each night. Those times are going to change depending on when the game starts and ends. And you can always find our show and watch it on demand, streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC. A new federal holiday in the United States. Why many say Juneteenth is long overdue. That's next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Hello to everyone watching online. Muslims represent nearly a quarter of the world's population, but they account for just a small fraction of roles in Hollywood productions. And many of those roles embody negative stereotypes. As Eli Glasner reports, there's now a push to change that.
Welcome to the land where the waters try to drown us in.
Toronto's Ali Momin is many things. An actor, a podcaster,
a healthcare system underfunded,
even an aspiring politician. But he'll never forget how Hollywood first cast him.
Suicide bomber number 3. In the movie Traitor with Don Cheadle.
He was trained to kill.
Eager for acting credits, Momin accepted.
In hindsight, I deeply regret it. I wish I never said yes. But if I'm to be honest, we use the word systemic all the time. I was a part of a system.
As his career continued, so did the offers. Terrorists, nefarious bad guys, generic Arab speakers, even though he's a non-Arab from Iran.
It otherizes you. And even when there is a Muslim representation that isn't terrorist-like or nefarious, it's exoticized.
A recent study confirms how Hollywood overlooks and ignores the Muslim community. Of the top 100 films in the U.S. from 2017 to 2019, only 1.1% of the speaking roles were Muslim. Then there's the issue of violence.
Specifically, about 40% of Muslim characters were shown as perpetrators of violence, and more than half of Muslim characters were shown as targets of violence. We also saw that 19% of Muslim characters in our sample also died by the end of the film.
Oscar-winning actor Riz Ahmed is part of a group that commissioned this study. He sees a connection between what happened in London, Ontario, and what we see on our screens.
People don't just wake up hating Muslims. They believe a story that we have to look at ourselves and ask whether we are complicit in perpetuating.
To combat that, Ahmed's partners are launching new guides and grants to support Muslim-centered stories.
I got fired.
Like the comedy series Dirty Love. Ottawa's Mesa Houri was tired of playing terrorist wives and refugees, so she created a show with a contemporary view of Muslim life.
I just wanted to be who I am, and I want to be able to show that on screen as well. We all have a story.
Using stories to push back against the stereotypes. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
We'll be back in a few moments with a new national holiday south of the border. You'll want to see this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On June 23rd, Anita Bath will moderate a panel of medical experts at UBC Dialogues Medical Innovations. Where is technology leading us? Learn more at alumni.ubc.ca. And June is Filipino Heritage Month, and CBC BC wants to share stories from BC's vibrant Filipino community. If you have a story to tell, head to cbc.ca/mabuhay today.
The United States has a new national holiday to mark a date that is widely accepted as the official end of slavery in that country. Juneteenth has long been celebrated as a holiday in most states, and it's been informally celebrated for generations. Farah Morali has more from Washington.
Ring with the harmonies.
It's a bill that commemorates the end of slavery more than 150 years ago. Earlier today, members of the Congressional Black Caucus celebrated its signing.
Congratulations, my colleagues. What you've done here today caps the long term.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right.
This afternoon, that bill was enshrined in law. Juneteenth, Independence Day, now officially a federal holiday.
Well, I think this will go down for me as one of the greatest honors I will have had as president, not because I did it, you did it.
There have been calls for Juneteenth, also known as Emancipation Day, to be recognized nationally. It commemorates the day the last slaves were freed. Confederate soldiers surrendered in April 1865, but it wasn't until 2 months later, on June 19th, that slaves in Texas got the message they were free.
Black Lives Matter!
Calls for recognition grew louder over the past year, following the killing of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, putting anti-black racism into the spotlight.
The yeas are 415 and the nays are 14. The bill is passed.
Though the bill passed in the House, it wasn't unanimous. 14 Republicans voted against it. Some cited concerns the bill was a push by the left to, quote, make Americans feel bad, or the name was too confusing with the 4th of July.
This is pretty consistent with, I think, the Republican base, and it's whether it's trying to fight against teaching basic history around racism and the role of racism in U.S. history to, there's a direct through line from that to denying Juneteenth.
The signing of this bill into law has created a surprise long weekend for some here in the United States. Since Juneteenth is this Saturday, federal workers will have tomorrow off. Celebrations are planned for here in D.C. and across the country. Farah Morali, CBC News, Washington.
China sent 3 astronauts into space today. How they're hoping to grow that country's permanent presence in the heavens after this.
Every day, about 100,000 cars cross Vancouver's Second Narrows Bridge. High above the riptides of Burrard Inlet, it connects the North Shore with the city of Vancouver. On this day in 1958, it was sunny, clear. The bridge was under construction. For the 79 men at work up there were just 20 minutes left till quitting time. Norm Atkinson was an iron worker, up on the front span when it happened. The bridge collapsed.
All of a sudden we had some high-powered rifle shots just like that. And we found that the bolts were just flying off like gunshots. And then the bridge went down. I was at the front end, and as it was leaving, I hung on to the star bracing. They call the star bracing, the sway bracing, and it hit the water, and I kept going right down to the bottom, right with the sand, right into the sand.
Atkinson came to the surface injured but alive. 18 others died that afternoon. Ed Cosgrove was a news photographer who happened to be driving by. He watched it happen.
And it went down so suddenly, it just, the 2 pieces like that, and it just went bang, down. And there was a dead stillness. You couldn't hear a thing. except I could hear this high-pitched whistling sound. I thought it was a steam escaping from a boiler or something. Then I figured out it was a guy screaming.
Then the sirens began to scream. Ambulances, police, boats streamed into Burrard Inlet to try to rescue survivors.
I grabbed my camera, and this camera, as a matter of fact, this camera is pretty old. It's older than you are, and it had film in it, so I ran down here and I started shooting pictures. And I must admit, I felt squeamish about it because there was people who needed help, but I didn't know what to do, you know, so I figured, well, I better do what I'm trained to do, and I took pictures. That was it.
I tried to jump over the side, but I went over with a locomotive. And, well, when I hit the water, I swallowed quite a bit of water. Finally, when I come to the top, I got hold of a plank and waited for a boat to pick me up.
Where were you when the bridge went?
Right up on the front end.
We found one man way up here, just by that lagoon up there. He had drifted up onto the pebble beach, and a priest was driving by, and he stopped his car and he came over to help. And the man was dead, so he gave him the last rites right there. It was a pretty horrendous day, really.
The second Narrows Bridge collapsed because of an engineering mistake in the original plans for construction. The bridge was rebuilt and officially opened in 1960. There are some who will never forget the price that was paid.
I'm very lucky, very lucky. So are the boys that are with me, same. They all feel lucky.
China launched 3 astronauts into space today, the country's first manned space mission in almost 5 years.
Launch, 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 launch.
The astronauts will spend 3 months working at China's new space station. Their spacecraft docked about 6 hours after launch. This mission is to prepare for 2 more modules that will be added to the station next year. Nice day for a launch there.
I was just going to say.
Wonder if it was as warm in the Gobi Desert as it was here in the South Coast.
I have a feeling it was pretty warm.
Is it time to break out the chi-chis and the board shorts yet?
Always. Who's to say we haven't already?
Okay, yeah. Got permission from you now. No one needs to see that, though.
No, it's been a great day. We had a lot of sunshine. A lot of people were out at the beach and at various patios, and that's the pattern we're going to see repeating, I suspect, well into next week, because this weather is what we're going to stick with. In fact, it's just going to get warmer and warmer. That, of course, brings with it a risk of things drying out across the province, where we already have moderate to high fire risks, especially up near Lytton, where we do already have that fire burning. So we'll keep an eye on that. But of course, we can also embrace the sunshine at the same time. It's good for the soul, and a lot of people just enjoy being out there. So tomorrow we'll see those temperatures anywhere from the high teens at the tip of the west side of Vancouver Island. But then as we move into the Fraser Valley, we're looking at those temperatures heading into the mid-20s. We do have a slight risk of some showers in Prince George in the morning, a little wet in Dease Lake, and for Prince Rupert. This is the system hitting the north coast, and as it dissipates, it will bring some precipitation to that Caribou region. And we will see a bit of cloud into the interior, and even for us here on the south coast on Saturday, a little bit cooler as well. But for the most part, we are just going to see those temperatures getting warmer and warmer each day until Monday, Tuesday. We're looking at 29 degrees inland and about 25 near the water. Of course, summer officially kicks off on Sunday. We're going to do it with highs around 24 at the beach.
How appropriate.
Indeed.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock after the National tonight with Tanya Fletcher. Have a good night.